All right, we have a compositional 10 tips for better photos today. Just talking a little bit about how to make your images better. And this is making your images better whether you are using a DSLR camera or whether you're using your mobile phone. And honestly, with mobile devices today and phones, you can shoot some incredibly great images with those. You don't necessarily have to have a DSLR. The vast majority of what I'm going to be talking about in this talk you can do with your phone, and you don't have to have the big fancy DSLR. So let's take a look at 10 tips for better photos. Now the first, in its most simple level, lighting and focus, which really are the two most important things here. If you don't have your lighting and your focus taken care of, none of the rest of what I'm going to talk about really matters. And in its most simplest form with lighting, what we're talking about is making sure the right amount of light is coming into your camera. You don't want too much or your picture is going to be blown out and way bright. You don't want too little or it's going to be way too dark and we can't make out the image. Just like that with focus, you have got to make sure you have a focused image, because if you don't have a focused image, again, we're not going to be able to see what's going on, and none of the rest of what you do is going to matter. Now, lighting and focus on a DSLR, obviously you need to know how to use aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and those things for lighting and focus. You need to know when to use manual and when to use autofocus. But lighting on your mobile device, you actually can control how much light's coming in. A lot of times that deals with just touching a certain part of your screen. You touch different parts of that screen and the lighting is going to change depending on what you want the camera to read the lighting from. There are also apps that give you much more control over aperture and shutter speed and numbers and things like that that you can download and use. Focus on a device is very, very similar. You touch different parts with the touch screen of your phone, and different parts of your image come in or out of focus. You can also hold down with your finger and it will lock focus on certain items. So those things are just important and crucial to know, and like I said, none of the rest of what I'm going to talk about really matters if you don't have the right amount of light coming in and if your picture's not in focus. Now if we take that to another level, you can also do things with lighting to make your image, give it more of a dramatic effect, set the mood a little bit. Maybe you have a softer light or a harsher light, but you can do things with external light or light from windows. Light can play a key role in things. And on the other side with focus, not only do you want your image in focus, but you can also control what's called depth of field. And what depth of field is, if you look at that picture of the runner, for instance, and you see the background is all blurry, now that is controlled by the aperture, which is something that when we talk DSLR, we'll get to a little bit more. But you can have your depth of field so that all those people in the background are blurry and your subject stands out more, or you can, with the setting of your camera, have it so those people are in focus and your subject in focus, and sometimes you do want those people in the background to be in focus. Again, a great compositional item, depth of field. Feel free to do some more looking about it. Now the next thing is center of interest. Now each photo that you take, you're really telling a story with a single frame. And just like a story, you need a main character. Your photos need a main character as well. You need something that's going to focus our eyes on it. Sometimes it's one thing. Sometimes it's a group of things. Sometimes it's a large mass or an area. But your story does need to be about something. And so here I would probably say the story on the left is about the kid getting hit and he's got the ball there. And there's that kind of mass of group. But we're focused in on them. It's not the whole entire football field. I'd say the center of interest on the right-hand side is probably not necessarily people, but the artwork that they're looking at. Okay, it's not the huge space. We're focused in on one little thing, a slice of what is happening there. So center of interest, make sure your picture is about something. Try not to have it be about everything all the time. Now, we will talk in other times about visual variety, and when you go out on an assignment, you should shoot what's called an overall shot, something of the whole entire football field and the fans in it. So we kind of set the stage to know if there's a lot of people there or not. Maybe the second type of shot you get here is a medium shot, and I'd say both of these are medium shots. They're, focused in on a person or a group of people. They're either full body or they're waist up, but we're much more zoomed in. And then the third type of shot, with visual variety, and there are a few different ways we can take that, but it's an up close shot where maybe it's just somebody's face or just somebody's hands working on things. So we'll see maybe some of those in the coming images. But center of interest, make sure your photos are about something, make sure they have a main character and they kind of tell a story. Next one is get up close and intense, bring them to the action. Now, talking about this, you always need to try to get I work with new photographers. I tell them get as close to your subject as you can and then take 2 more steps. And what your goal is as a photographer is to take people places they can't go. They can't get, the only other person who's going to get this close in this image is probably the referee of this wrestling match. And they're going to be able to see that because they're on the mat keeping score and taking care of everything. But the masses are going to be up in the stands. And so we shouldn't be taking photos from sports up in the stands. I'm not saying you can be on the field or on the mat, but you need to be on the edge of the mat, or you need to be on the edge of the field, or we need to be at the front of the stage if something's going on at the stage, or if it is a lab in a class, we need to be right next to or directly across from people performing a lab, so we really can kind of be up in their business. The masses, when they go see events or when they go see places, they're not going to get up that close. And so we want to give them images that don't look like what they're used to. They're used to seeing things kind of from this overall perspective. They're not so used to seeing them up close. And as they're flipping through the yearbook, as they're flipping through the newspapers, they're flipping through the website, we want them to see images and take a second look at those images and stop, because the images look so good. And bringing people into the action as much as possible is a great way to do that. A lot of times, and if that's outside, it's just getting really close to people, getting in front of their faces. We're going to talk about faces in a little bit, but don't be afraid. You guys have a camera. They know you're shooting for the yearbook or newspaper or the website. They think that is cool, and honestly, the vast majority of people, even if they say, oh, I don't want my picture taken, they actually do, and they think it's neat that you're there. So don't get in their way. Let them do whatever it is they're doing, but get up in the action. Maybe it's even this close. I talked earlier about the wide, medium, and the tight shots, and this is definitely a tight shot. It is somebody getting a tattoo. And a lot of times when we think of tattoo, it's probably somebody sitting in the chair and you see their face and you see the full body, or you see the entire chair they're sitting in. That's a great shot to get, and getting an overall shot of the entire room that the person's getting the tattoo in while they're getting it is great. But also, don't underestimate what the impact is of getting up close and shooting something. Now, getting up close might mean using a zoom lens. I tell you, try not to zoom in too much with your mobile phones. If you pinch and zoom in on mobile phones, you end up losing quality quite a bit. Depending on what device you're using, I tell people zoom with your feet. So just zoom, get a lot closer, but you can fill the frame like this. The one thing I say comes up sometimes, though, is you can't be within, depending on your camera, and you need to know your camera. Sometimes it's 2.5 feet, sometimes it's 1.5 feet. If you're too close, your image isn't going to focus. But you can find that little window there where you can be, okay, I can get this close and my picture can still be in sharp focus. Get as close as you can. Sometimes using a zoom lens is very, very effective to bring people in places they can't go. But try to get a mix of images as you go out. Now, one of the biggest things for beginning photographers to learn is rule of thirds. Rule of thirds basically says you put a tic-tac-toe board over your photo and your center of interest. That thing we talked about earlier, who your main character is, whatever your photo is about, is in one of those intersections. And so we see here in this photo of the kid jumping up in this huddle, he is in the upper left intersection, and yeah. So you don't want to have your subject in the dead center of the photo. They've done a bunch of studies on this. Visually, it's just not as appealing, but you generally want your subject in one of those intersections, and preferably either facing straight out or into the photo. You see he's facing right into the photo. There's a lot of space for him to face. It would not be maybe as good of an image if he was facing that way, but on the right third. He would be looking more off the photo. Rule of thirds, this works horizontal and it works vertical. The next one's capture real life, and this is just basically get people doing what they're doing. Now, the natural tendency for people is to smile for the camera or pose whenever you get it. It's tough to get beyond that. And what I would say is if you're in a small confined space, like a lab in a class, or you're in a ball field where it's a crowd that you're taking and they definitely know you're there, and they're mugging for you. What you just have to say is, okay, let me get your picture once, and then get them all together, take a picture quick, and then say, okay, that was great. Now, I need to get some action shots of you guys just doing what you're doing and kind of ignoring me here. Because you don't want them to get that like smile on their face that you can totally tell by looking at the photo that the person in the image knows the picture is being taken of them, and so they feel they have to smile, but they're like cutting open an earthworm. It's like, really, why are you smiling cutting open an earthworm? That's weird. Anyway, but they know you're there, and so you want to try to get them to relax. You want to try to get them to just go about their business. I find the longer you just kind of wait there and the more patient you are, they finally forget about you and let you just do your thing. But we want to see faces, and we just want to see life as it normally is, whether it's simply people raising their hands asking questions in a class, or whether it's a crowd cheering at a ball game. Now, another one of the easy tricks to get, but one that is not used as much as it probably should, is getting different perspectives and avoiding, I would avoid 5'10" syndrome. You interject your own height in there, 4'10" or 5'2", whatever it is. But basically, you don't want to take all of your photos from your own eye level. You want to get down, like if people are working down on the ground on something, lay down on your belly and shoot photos of what they're doing down there. Maybe you get a low angle up. Maybe you get up high. Maybe you climb a ladder and you shoot down on something. Maybe you simply stand on a chair. Maybe you stand on a table. Please make sure if you're standing on chairs or tables in classrooms that you are asking about that. Maybe you're shooting directly over tops of something that is going on. Sometimes, if you don't have a chair or a ladder or things, simply doing what we call a Hail Mary shot works, where you take your camera and you hold it over your head and you shoot some photos that way. Now, if you do that, make sure to tilt your camera down a little bit most of the time, as you're going to want that angle a little bit so you're not shooting straight ahead. But holding cameras above your head works very well sometimes too. Limit dead space. You just want to try to fill your entire frame with what's going on. You don't want to have a bunch of extraneous space around. If it is something that you are shooting that is tall, you probably want to turn your camera vertically. You see that image on the left? It's an up and down photo. Your phone's turned that way. DSLRs will allow you to shoot that way. Everything does not have to be shot horizontally. It's good to have a mix, actually, of horizontal and vertical photos, because you never know what designers are going to need, and the more options you give them, the better odds you have of getting one of your great shots in there. So limit your dead space. We see there's not a lot of what we call headroom above their heads. Those things are pretty tight. We don't see things on the left or right either that are there. Next is decisive moment. If there is action, if it's a lab, if it is a ball game, you want like the peak action, like that moment right when, ooh, what's going to happen next? Where the ball is connecting with the bat, or where the soccer ball is in midair and these two girls are fighting for it, and who's going to end up coming out with the ball in the very, very end. It's suspended there. We have some leading looks, which we'll talk about. For a speaker, it's as simple as the speaker should have their mouth open because they're speaking. Maybe they have some hand movements going on as well, but getting people what they're doing in the right moment. Don't just shoot moments, work to get the right moment. Work to get faces 99 times out of 100. Faces show emotion. Emotion are what draws people into photos and have them give a second look to things. So make sure you do try to get around. I know, again, as an aspiring photographer, that's tough sometimes because you want to hide behind people. the sooner you can break away from hiding behind people and get confidence to get in front of them, your pictures are going to change dramatically from the start. Just a couple more here, leading looks and leading lines. One thing, if you notice here in this photo, we have all these people. Their eyes are directed up at our center of interest, our person who is talking here, and they're giving leading looks. This person crowd surfing down here, we're using hands as leading lines to draw us to our center of interest. And then you have a rustling photo with, well, it's got some leading looks in it. Leading looks help keep you on the photo. If people are looking, they should not be looking off the photo. They should be looking into the photo. The lines should be leading us to our center of interest. Using things like this can dramatically increase how good compositionally our images look. And finally, frame your photos when possible. I'm not talking about going out to Target and buying frames. I'm talking about finding things in nature, whether they're doorways, windows, tree branches, and maybe you can use them to frame your subject to add a little bit more appeal to the images. Now, going back through all these, it's great if you can use, obviously, one of them, and I really would encourage you to use at least one. You do not and cannot use all of them in every photo, but you can combine multiple of these compositional tips into your images to make good photos great. And that's really what we're going for. Good luck with this. Can't wait to see what you shoot. Please come talk to me if you got questions.